everyone? Welcome to KTAL News Now. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin, and today is Friday, which means it is Football Friday here on KTAL News Now, and the return of college football after a little bit of a hiatus with the bye weeks and everything regarding the college football playoff. But before we get into that, be sure you're following us on all of our social channels at KTAL News, especially our YouTube page, where you can find all of our previous editions of KTAL News Now that talk about entertainment, local events that are happening this weekend. That was yesterday's episode. And then, of course, Tech Tuesdays and our Wellness Wednesday segments. So we have a little something for everyone. So be sure to check that out on KTAL News on our YouTube. And we stream every single day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. on KTALnews.com. But let's get into our first event of the day, specifically with Thursday Night Football. Last night in the NFL was an absolute thriller in overtime featuring the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this was a very, very tightly contested game coming into it because these teams were fighting for the top spot in the NFC West division. And these teams, the Rams are now 11-4, and the Seattle Seahawks are 12-3. So they're neck and neck right there. And, of course, you still have the San Francisco 49ers to worry about because they are also 10-4. So that division is absolutely stacked. 3 playoff teams, 100% in that division. So that's a lot to fight through. But if you saw this game, especially towards the end, you'll know that we witnessed one of the craziest two-point conversions I have personally ever seen. I'm sure y'all feel the same way. But my goodness, man, that was such a mind-blowing finish to the game to tie things up at 30. I'll get into that a little bit more as we go along, but Seattle as a team converted 3 two-point conversions throughout the game. They found themselves down 16 at one point in the second half. Most people thought the game was pretty much over, but they stormed all the way back to win in overtime. But in terms of how the game flowed, Seattle got things kicked off with Zach Charbonnet, their running back. He punched it in to make it 7-0, so they took an early lead. And then the Rams responded with a Terrence Ferguson touchdown and a couple of field goals to make it 13-7 at halftime. So pretty normal score, right? Everything was going normal. It was fine. But then the second half and the ensuing overtime period is where all hell broke loose in terms of the scoring, because Seattle kicked things off with a 55-yard breakaway touchdown from running back Kenneth Walker, and that put them up 14-13, but they kind of stalled out after a while once that happened, largely due to a Sam Darnold interception, Seattle's quarterback, and that was returned by the Rams all the way down to the 1-yard line, and they, of course, punched it in with Blake Corum, their running back. And then their next possession, they scored a Puka Nacua touchdown to make it 30-14. So at this point, Seattle is staring down the barrel of the gun. They're pretty much on the ropes when it comes to finishing a team in the NFL. And their special teams came through in the clutch because Rashid Shaheed, New Orleans Saints fans out there, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Uber talented, super fast guy. He's their punt returner. He returned a punt 58 yards for a touchdown, and then Cooper Kupp was found in the end zone for a successful 2-point conversion. That was their second of the game. And then defense held things strong again for Seattle, and then that resulted in an A.J. Barner touchdown. And this was the play where they scored that insane 2-point conversion. And if you didn't get to see it, I highly recommend going to check out a clip of it because it is absolutely insane. So basically, I'm going to walk you through it. So Sam Darnold, he drops back to pass. He throws it to the side of him, and it ends up going backwards. So it counts as a lateral, technically. It's not a forward pass, so the ball was still live. It bounces off of a Rams player's helmet and goes forward towards the end zone. It actually lands in the end zone and stops in the end zone. And Zach Charbonnet literally just leans over, picks it up with one hand while he's in the end zone, and after review, they ruled it a successful 2-point conversion. Like, everybody thought the play was over. He just walks up, grabs the football, and it's in the end zone, and they count it as a 2-point conversion. So that one ended up tying things at 30, and that is what eventually led to them leading into the overtime period. And the Rams did have a chance to score again outside of the 2-minute warning, but kicker Harrison Mevis, who had been pretty solid all game, he had made a bunch of field goals prior to this. He missed a 48-yard field goal wide right, which would have given them the lead, 33-30, but it went into overtime tied at 30. And the Rams, they weren't going to go out quietly because, they gave up that 16-point comeback in the fourth quarter, but they opened things up pretty quickly with a 41-yard touchdown to Puka Nacua to go up 37-30. But then the Seahawks responded with a touchdown drive of their own, thanks to huge catches from Jackson Smith and Jigba with a 17-yard reception and then a 21-yard reception to Cooper Kupp. And then they found JSN, or Jackson Smith and Jigba, in the end zone for the touchdown. In Seattle, they were like, we're not playing for a tie. We're going to go out and win this thing. And they did with an Eric Saubert wide open 2-point conversion to mark their third 2-point conversion success of the day. That's got to be a hat trick of some sort, but I can't remember the last time that has ever happened. And fun fact, they are actually the first NFL team to have a walk-off 2-point conversion win in overtime. So that was pretty cool to see, especially the fact that they stormed and made that comeback, and they ended up winning 38-37 in overtime. Crazy finish to that game. And that was such a delight, considering the fact that Thursday night games of years past have been kind of slugfest when it comes to teams being on such a short week. And, usually there's not a lot of scoring with that. But this one proved everybody wrong when it comes to prime time games. This is how they should be. This was arguably one of the best games, if not the best game of the year to watch on prime time. So it was such a treat for NFL fans of all fandoms, regardless of who you root for. But with the Seahawks, like I was saying before, in the NFC West, they are also racing to claim the number 1 seed in the NFC as a whole, which was previously held by the Rams, and now they are also atop the NFC West with the Rams and the Niners, like I mentioned. So with just 2 games left for each of those teams, it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top in the division, because that has huge implications for seeding in the playoffs, because only the number 1 seed in the conference gets a bye week now, and that is huge going forward in the playoffs. So we'll see what the ramifications of that will be. But looking to college football, we are finally back to college football after a little bit of a hiatus. These teams have gotten a few weeks off. They're well rested, ready to go. And first up, we have number 9 Alabama taking on number 8 Oklahoma. Now, if you remember earlier this season in the regular season, Oklahoma went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama 23-21, despite being outgained by almost twice the amount of yardage. Oklahoma would only gain 212 yards compared to Alabama's 406. And Alabama did have 3 turnovers in this game, including a pick 6. That was Oklahoma's first touchdown of the game. So that pretty much set the tone early on. We all know how good Oklahoma's defense has been all year, and especially in the turnover battle. So that is huge. And the winner of this game actually gets the chance to play number 1 Indiana. So good luck to either of those teams, because Indiana just beat Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, as you recall, and they looked pretty solid. I'd be very scared to go up against them. Again, they're number 1 undefeated. It's going to be tough to beat them. But in that earlier regular season game with Oklahoma and Alabama, Oklahoma did get to quarterback Ty Simpson 4 times. They sacked him 4 times in that game, and that was without their best pass rusher, R. Mason Thomas, and he is back for this game. So it's going to be hell on earth for Ty Simpson in trying to evade that pressure when it comes Saturday. Or it's actually tonight, excuse me. I forgot it was tonight. But Alabama, if you look at the Iron Bowl, they almost lost in Auburn in that game, and it was pretty much the reverse card of Oklahoma, except they did not come out on top when it comes to Auburn, because Auburn outgained Alabama 411-280. And when it came to third downs, Alabama only converted 4 of their 17 third downs. So they did really not look that great on offense. And if we're being honest, the last month or so prior to these bye week and the hiatus and everything, they really have not looked like a playoff team as a whole. I mean, really nothing has been impressive from them, and their quarterback Ty Simpson has really struggled under the pressure that teams are throwing at him under the last few weeks. But in terms of the SEC championship game, we all saw how that played out. Alabama got absolutely demolished by Georgia, 28-7, in a game where if you watch previous editions of Football Friday, you know that I've highlighted Alabama's lack of a run game. They really have no identity running the ball. It's kind of a mixed bag whenever they feed it to somebody. And in that game against Georgia, they only averaged 1.5 yards per play on the ground, which is absolutely abysmal. And they really need to get things going against Oklahoma. But again, Oklahoma's pass rush and run defense, they're among the best in the SEC. And that's going to be a very tough test for them. So I think they lean on the air a little bit, but they won't have a lot of success on the ground, if at all. But for Oklahoma, their offense, they really haven't been that impressive either. Quarterback John Mateer has only completed about 62% of his passes for almost 2,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. So really not the most efficient. He did have surgery earlier this season to repair his thumb, and after that, he pretty much wasn't the same as he was pre-injury. But he is also somebody that can get things done on the ground, as he has over 400 yards rushing and 7 rushing touchdowns. So Alabama really will need to contain him again if they want to try to at least compete in this game. But for Oklahoma's rushing attack, they really have this three-headed dragon when it comes to rushing, including Mateer, because they have Torrey Blaylock, who is their lead running back, and then they also have Xavier Robinson, and then as well as John Mateer. They pretty much have a three-pronged approach when it comes to running the ball. All of them have been super efficient on the ground all season. So they'll probably look to them in what should be a low-scoring game, because Bama's defense is not any slouch either. And for Bama's offense, they really need to get Ty Simpson going, like I was saying, but also wide receiver Ryan Williams, who is this phenom as a freshman. Everybody thought he would be the next best thing. But in his last 4 games, he has not had more than 3 catches or more than 45 yards in any of those 4 games. So they really need to get him going. But Oklahoma's secondary gave Ty Simpson fits last time. So we'll see if they can even try to get him open, because he is somebody that can make super explosive plays happen. If you've seen any of their games this year, he is a very talented receiver. They just need to try to get him the ball. But if I had to pick this game, it's hard to beat Bama, especially twice in a season. But I'd probably roll with Oklahoma. They just have looked better as of late as a team. They beat Alabama earlier this year despite a few mishaps and miscues. They really couldn't get things going. But Alabama's offense has really been struggling the last few weeks. And I think that Oklahoma's defense, among the best in the SEC, if not the best, absolutely capitalizes on that. And they're first in sacks and first in tackles for loss in the country. So it's going to be pretty tough for Alabama's offense to get anything going, I think. And fun fact, with a win, Oklahoma, as I said, they beat them earlier in the regular season. They would actually be the first program to beat Alabama twice in a season since 1893. Which is even crazy to even read on a piece of paper, regardless of even saying it out loud. That's just insane. It's been over a century since that has been done. And if you look at the season, the historical series between these two schools before Oklahoma joined the SEC, counting those, they've really only played very sparingly. But Oklahoma has won 4 of the last 5 matchups against Alabama. So take that with what you will. I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game between 2 elite defenses. Very old-school, smash-mouth football, so I think it'll be a very low-scoring affair where Oklahoma ends up coming out on top. But looking ahead to one of the other matchups regarding Miami and Texas A&M. This one is probably my favorite one on the slate in terms of what ended up being the most fun, if that makes sense. Because, sure, old-school, smash-mouth football with Oklahoma, defensive lovers will adore that one. I think that will be an absolute thriller to watch at the end, because I think whoever has the ball last will end up winning that game depending on how it goes. But In this one, both of these teams ended up beating Notre Dame earlier in the season, and that was probably what ultimately led to leaving Notre Dame out of the playoff. There was a whole lot of controversy with Notre Dame. They said they were opting out of their bowl games because they didn't make the 12-team playoff. Whatever, let them cry about it. Sorry to any Notre Dame fans out there, but my feelings on them. But in terms of these two schools, this is actually both of these teams' first ever college football playoff appearance, regardless of any 4-team or 12-team format. So really glad to see them getting to shine on this national stage when they previously haven't. But for Miami, they are looking back to get back to their glory days when it comes to greatest teams ever. Their last national championship was that 2001 Miami Hurricanes team, and this would be their 6th ever national championship as a school if they were to go all the way. But Texas A&M, on the other hand, they have a much larger drought because their last title came in 1939, which is almost a century ago. And that's going to be really, really tough for them to try to overcome and rewrite history, if you will. Because if you look at their last game against Texas, they did lose that game 27-17. And that pretty much spoiled their chances of any perfect season from happening because they did fall to 11-1 after that game. But the winner of this the winner of this game will go to face number 2 Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. And that's going to be a really, really tough matchup for either team, but we'll see what happens with that. But for Miami, quarterback Carson Beck has thrown for over 3,000 yards, 25 passing touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. But if you look at the efficiency in his last 4 games, he only threw 1 interception in that time frame. So he was really, really efficient down the stretch, and I think they absolutely deserve to be here regardless of the outcome. But their offense as a whole has been on the money when it comes to passing, rushing, you name it. Running back Mark Fletcher Jr., this was a really, really fun tidbit that I found out. He is averaging 3.4 yards after his first contact. So as soon as he comes into contact with a defender, he is still averaging over 3 more yards after that. So he is fighting off that contact and getting the yards much because every yard counts when it comes to this stage, especially in the playoffs. And wide receiver Malachi Toney, probably one of the best, if not the best receiver in the country right now. He has 84 catches on the season, which is good for 6th in the nation. And he has also racked up 970 receiving yards, which is good for 18th in the nation, and 7 touchdowns. And if he gets 30 more yards this weekend, he would be just the 8th player in Miami football history to have a 1,000-yard receiving season, which is pretty cool. It's a great milestone for him and puts himself in the history books. And then if you look at Miami's defense, they are also top 15 in pretty much every statistical category. They also have the top-ranked pass rush in the nation, and that is largely thanks to Reuben Bain Jr. as well as Akeem Mesidor. Those two have combined for 15 sacks on the season, so they are relentless when it comes to getting to the quarterback. But if you look at Texas A&M, quarterback Marcel Reed has been pretty solid for them. He has thrown for over 2,900 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, and he has also added 466 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. And he is also on pace for a milestone of his own, because if he racks up a couple more yards to get to 3,000 and then gets to 500 rushing yards, he would be the 3rd ever Texas A&M player to have 3,000 passing yards and 500 rushing yards in a season, joining Johnny Manziel, who did it twice, which is insane, and then Gerard Johnson. So he would be the 3rd Aggie to ever do so. And their defense, they're amazing up front too when it comes to getting to the quarterback. They had 41 sacks this year, which is tied for Oklahoma for 1st in the nation. And that is largely thanks to defensive end Cassius Howell, who is 1st in the SEC and 4th in the country with 11.5 sacks this season. But if you look at Miami's offensive line, they have been amazing at protecting the quarterback because they have only allowed 11 sacks on the season, which is the 8th fewest in the country. So that's going to be one of the key matchups to watch up front in the trenches, and that's what football is all about, am I right? But Texas A&M, when it comes to their red zone defense, They are unfortunately among one of the worst in the country, ranking 131st, giving up 30 scores in 32 tries in the red zone. So once they get there, they unfortunately pretty much collapse. And Miami, on the other hand, in their red zone efficiency, they score on about 92% of their red zone trips, with 71% of those being touchdowns. So I think if Miami can end up getting inside the 20, they can make the most of those scoring opportunities, and it might be a long day for Texas A&M if they allow them to get there and keep driving down the field. Miami is also inside the top 25 when it comes to turnover margin, and regarding their last few games, they are only averaging 0.7 turnovers per game in their last 3 games, where if you look at Texas A&M, they are on the outside of the top 100 in turnover rate, and in their last 3 games, they are averaging 2.3 turnovers per game. So not a good combination if you are Texas A&M, but as the defensive units as a whole, both of these teams rank in the top 25 in sacks and tackles for loss. So it could be another defensive game here with a low-ish scoring affair, but I think Miami's offense is good enough to put up a good bit of points on the board. So Miami is an underdog in this game. They are 3.5-point underdogs, so I kind of like them to cover this at least, even if they don't win outright. If it was 2.5, I might be slightly inclined to take Texas A&M because a field goal can change a lot of things. But if Miami only loses by a field goal, 3.5 would still cash. So I kind of like to take that a little bit. I just like their turnover margin better, their red zone efficiency, like I mentioned, and their ability to limit mobile quarterbacks. So I think they come away with at least a close game, if not a win outright. But looking to some of the more lopsided games later in the day, unfortunately, we have number 11 Tulane taking on number 6 Ole Miss, and this spread is pretty large. It's 17.5. You know, as I went to Tulane for a semester, so it's hard to kind of see them in this spot. Although they did pull up that upset against USC a few years back, which everybody went crazy about. So anything could happen, but will it? We'll see. The winner of this game will face number 3 Georgia in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. And if you look at, this is another rematch of earlier in the season where Ole Miss beat Tulane pretty handily, 45-10. It wasn't even close in that one back in September. Although that was a long time ago, it could be a different story this time around. But Ole Miss is in the middle of a coaching shakeup. If you haven't heard the news, you're probably living under a rock when it comes to Ole Miss's head coach Lane Kiffin taking the LSU football job. And they promoted defensive coordinator Pete Golding to their new head coach. And then they're also getting John Summerall, who with Tulane, their head coach is leaving to take the Florida job. So there's a lot of coaching shakeup in this matchup. It'll be interesting to see what exactly that translates to on the field, given this turnover with both head coaches. But quarterback Jake Retzlaff for Tulane, he has been pretty elite this year with everything that he's been given. He is approaching almost 3,500 total yards, 30 total touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions. But in that earlier game against Ole Miss, he only completed 5 of 17 passes for 56 yards. So they really locked him down in that one, at least through the air. But he has still accounted for 16 of Tulane's 26 rushing yards on the season, which is pretty insane. And Ole Miss, on the other hand, quarterback Trinidad Chambliss, he is a true underdog story. He was a former Division II transfer that he is now being put on this center stage when it comes to leading one of the best offenses in the nation. And he is also approaching 3,500 total yards, 24 total touchdowns, and just 3 interceptions. So he has been super, super efficient with all the opportunities that he has been given. And in that earlier game against Tulane, he racked up 307 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, as well as 112 rushing yards. So the Tulane really has to try to contain him if they want any chance of winning this game, which they really don't have a lot of to begin with. But for Ole Miss, running back Kawan Lacey has lit up the college football world on the ground. He is approaching 1,300 yards and 20 rushing touchdowns, which is an Ole Miss program record. So he is having such a great season. And Ole Miss as a whole, all those players combined to lead Ole Miss in their offensive insanity, because they are third in the nation in yards with 498 yards per game and 11th in scoring with 37.3 points per game. So they have been one of the nation's top offenses all season, even against Oklahoma. When they beat Oklahoma, as good as Oklahoma's defense has been all year, they were still able to win that game. But like I said earlier, crazier things have happened here. The spread is 17.5. Tulane did pull off that crazy upset in the Cotton Bowl in 2022 against USC. So is something else or something familiar in store here? Not this year. I don't think so. I think Ole Miss will win this game pretty handily. I'd like them to cover 17.5 here in this one. But looking at the final game of the slate to cap off the night in this college football Saturday, we have James Madison taking on Oregon. Now, a lot of people, this one is the biggest spread in any college football game since expanding to the 12-team format. So this one might be even more lopsided than the Tulane game. But the winner of this one will face number 4 Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. And if you saw Texas Tech in their conference championship against BYU, they looked absolutely dominant. So I would hate to try to face them. Their defense was flying around all day. I would not want to face them in any capacity. But James Madison is 12-1 on the season. Their only loss was to Louisville, which was their only Power 4 opponent. So a lot of people like to point to that and say, oh, they don't deserve to be here. They finally played a real team and lost 28-14. I get that, but again, that was way earlier in the season. They're a different offense now, so anything could happen. They did end up winning their first ever Sun Belt championship, and they're also in the middle of a crazy coaching carousel because their head coach, Bob Chesney, just took the UCLA head coaching job, and they're also bringing in Billy Napier, who used to coach at UL Lafayette in Louisiana and then Florida. So they are also bringing in a new head coach and trying to balance their current one still. Meanwhile, Oregon, on the other hand, they have a lot more turnover because their offensive coordinator, Will Stein, is taking the Kentucky football head coaching job, and their defensive coordinator, Josh Lupoy, is taking the California head coaching job, or Cal football job. So they're losing both coordinators. That's a really, really tough draw to have. And it'll be interesting to see how they still mesh with their players and their game plan, knowing that is in kind of like the back of their minds. And for James Madison, quarterback Alonzo Barnett III has been really, really good this year. He won the Sun Belt Player of the Year, and he has thrown for over 2,500 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And he has also ran for over 500 yards and 14 touchdowns rushing. So he's been great as a dual threat quarterback. Oregon, on the other hand, their quarterback Dante Moore has thrown for over 2,700 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions. So he has been super efficient as well. He is also getting a slew of wide receivers back from injury because DeCorian Moore, who is a standout freshman, he has missed 4 games this year due to a knee injury. And then you have Gary Bryant Jr., who missed 3 games this season, and then Evan Stewart, who hasn't played a single game all season. And all 3 of them have been at practice this week, so they might end up suiting up, and he'll have a finally fully healthy receiving core to throw to. But if I had to pick this game, it is such a large spread. It's the biggest ever in a 12-team college football game. But it still might be a little bit too much, and I get it, the criticisms of James Madison losing to their only Power 4 team with Louisville, 28-14. They got beat pretty badly in that game. But they have nothing to lose. I mean, they're such big underdogs in this game, over 3 touchdowns that they're underdogged by, and there's really no guarantee that Oregon just kind of walks in there and wins by 4 touchdowns. It's just too much of a spread in a playoff game for me, especially with the coaching turnover of Oregon, and their receivers might not be fully healthy. I'm not quite ready to take them to win by more than 3 touchdowns. And there's always the possibility of a backdoor cover, too, where Oregon might be up 4 touchdowns at one point, but at that point in the fourth quarter, there might be, 3 minutes left, and they kind of just really don't care about stopping them 100% anymore. And James Madison ends up scoring one of their only touchdowns of the game late, and then they only lose by 21, and then that would essentially cover the 21 and a half. So that is definitely a possibility if the game gets out of hand and Oregon just kind of coasts the rest of the way. So that is definitely in the realm of possibilities. But that's all I have today for today's edition of Football Friday. Be sure to tune in each and every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. on KTAL News Now. And you can also visit our website, which is where we stream at ktalnews.com, to find all of your local breaking and trending news stories. But for now, I'm Anthony Mocklin. Have a great rest of your day and weekend, and thank you for joining us.